So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erik Tateri. I'm a lecturer in engineering at UC Irvine. The presentation today will be blending traditional grading point system with mastery specifications grading system. Because I know some of you or a lot of you might be a little iffy in terms of implementing specs grading into your course. And I feel I've created a hybrid model that could be easier for you guys to use and possibly implement toward full specs grading if need be. So first things first, I teach Engineering 190W, which is a technical communications course here at Irvine. It is an upper division course, so I only teach juniors and seniors. It is a required course. They must pass the course in order to graduate. So the audience is really captivated, if you will. We include short writing assignments, some major assignments as well, which includes individual writing work and collaborative writing work, and also individual presentations and collaborative presentations as well. The bread and butter of the course is really focusing on the 4 C's, which stands for clarity, correctness, completion, and concision. The 4 C's pretty much is the standard tenet for the course in terms of how I've organize all my formative assignments as well as summative assignments as well. So initially, during fall 2021, I partially implemented mastery specs grading into my course. And before I did so, what I did was do a self-assessment of where I am as an instructor before I implement this new assessment, and then assess the course and how students were actually interacting with the new assessment. And I mentioned that teaching written and oral communications to engineers requires one to balance between being objective and subjective when it comes to assessing student work. And so most students were having a difficult time understanding the assessment because it is mostly communications based, which could be very subjective when it comes to assessment. But specifications grading focuses so much on course learning objectives and organizing those objectives in a way that assessment is more objective as opposed to subjective. That being said, in fall 2021, I've implemented a partial specs grading, but initially students were quite befuddled by the lack of points. They wanted to count points because, well, I teach a bunch of engineers and they need numerical data. So to meet in the middle, I decided to incorporate some points, but the points will be the backseat while the objectives will be the driver. And I'll show you what I mean in the next slide. So of course I had to explain what MSG, Mastery Specs Grading, to focus more is objectives more than the points. And students needed some time to understand that concept because they're just so used to that traditional grading system. So what I did during fall 2021 is implement the EMRN scale. As you can see here, it focuses on how does the specifications meet the work, or how do specifications comprise the work that they need to complete in order for them to have a grade that they've earned. So if they do complete the specifications appropriately, of course, yes, it will take you to E or M. So they exceed expectations, they get an E. If they meet expectations, they get an M. However, if they don't meet initial expectations, they'll go to the no category, and ultimately they'll receive an R or an N, R for revision and N meaning it does not meet expectations. However, since there is an R, if students score 3 or more R's or N's on their rubric, the student has an opportunity to submit a revision. And since this is a writing course as well, it's always good to practice revision because it does exercise the writing process as a craft. So specs grading really delves into the main principles that go behind crafting writing, composition, and rhetoric as well, especially for an engineering audience. So by incorporating the EMRN scale that I just mentioned, I wanted to give a sample of one of the rubrics that I use for the major assignments in my course. So for example, we have to balance course learning objectives specifically for Engineering 190W, but also we have to incorporate AVET objectives as well. And so you can see here, the first objective is for our particular course, and these two outcomes are for accreditation. I've only placed E, M, and R because N is simply 0 points. I just don't meet any of the expectations. But however, you will see that I've incorporated some points with the specifications of E, M, and R. Again, we're trying to do that hybrid format where students can see, okay, I'm getting these amount of points, which somehow points really excites them when they try to do work. And they have to understand that these are the expectations for you to earn this E, which equals 15 points. So again, in the rubric, it specifically states all of this information. So if you actually look at my rubric on our Canvas course space, it's actually inundated with words. And so that's the only negative in terms of the rubric, that it's quite overwhelming the first time you look at it. But over time, students actually buy in with the rubric because it's so informative and it does stress the course learning objectives mainly. Our next slide, I've also created a grading bundle. Now, other instructors who have incorporated specs grading bundled their assignments, which I do as well. But I've also taken it one step further and I've sort of bundled the expectations, the course learning objectives, if you will. As you can see here, for a major assignment number 1, a journal article summary, if to average an A, they have to get approximately 5 E's and 2 M's on average. So it really focuses on, again, consolidating the objectives, but also keeping track of the objectives and making them front and center as opposed to the points. Even though there are points throughout to sort of make the students happy in terms of, hey, this is the data that I need, the numerical data, I understand how to calculate it. They're getting both the expectations and the points. And as you can see here, as I mentioned before, I've bundled not just the expectations, but also the assignments. And for this given assignment, it's called Written Mastery. There are 5 major assignments altogether, each worth 100 points. So there's 500 points. And of course, that's weighted as well. So that's more of that traditional grading system mixed in with specs grading, which again focuses more on the course learning objectives and accreditation objectives as well. Our next slide. I finally implemented full specs grading recently in winter 22. So basically, I incorporated more of that EMRN, made sure that EMRN is outlined in every single rubric that I use for every single assignment. Therefore, by making assignments clearer and outlining the objectives in a way that amalgamates with the assignments that need to be accomplished to meet course learning objectives, it made specs grading a lot easier for me to navigate, as well as for the students as well. So again, I've created a rubric and a grading bundle just to consolidate all the information so it's easier for students to comprehend. What did students have to say about all this? Well, at first, most of them were overwhelmed, as you can see in that first quote there. But ultimately, at the end of the quarter, they understood that objectives is where it's at, basically. Objectives is what I need to understand fully and internalize it in order for me to take hold of my own learning. However, some students didn't really care for the new grading system. They thought it was just extra fluff. It's still the same thing as traditional grading. It's just more words. However, again, those words are increasingly significant because they are objectives, and that's pretty much the foundation for our course. However, some students also appreciate how organized and clear the rubrics were, and that's of course thanks to Kate for helping me organize my objectives in a way that's easier for my target audience to understand. So again, it's all about organization. Organization leads to proper buy-in for students. And once students buy in, it will take some time for them to get used to specs grading. But ultimately, as you reach the end of the quarter or the semester, they're very appreciative of focusing on those objectives in terms of self-enriching fulfillment. Our next slide. Final thoughts. So as I mentioned before, what mastery specification grading does well is highlight course learning objectives for students to understand ways in which they can improve upon their existing communication skills, and remind them that writing is a continuous craft. And although it initially took some time and work to commit to converting to mastery grading, the assessment is rewarding because it consolidates assignments together to make grading less taxing on the instructor and underscores for students their self-enriching value behind taking responsibility for their own learning. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my presentation, and I look forward to your questions during the questions round.